legal experts are warning of a constitutional crisis, as the Trump administration hints it may ignore a federal judge's ruling temporarily blocking Elon Musk and his Doge associates from accessing the Treasury Department's payment systems and sensitive data. Over the weekend, Elon Musk lashed out at Judge Paul Engelmeyer, referring to him on X as a, quote, corrupt judge protecting corruption, calling for Engelmeyer to be impeached. In his ruling, Engelmeyer warned of irreparable harm presented by Doge's access to sensitive information and of the, quote, heightened risk that the systems in question will be more vulnerable than before to hacking, unquote. In response, Vice President J.D. Vance said on X, quote, if a judge tried to tell a general how to conduct a military operation, that would be illegal. If a judge tried to command the Attorney General on how to use her discretion as a prosecutor, that's also illegal. Judges aren't allowed to control the executive's legitimate power, said the Vice President of the United States, a graduate of Yale Law School, J.D. Vance. Meanwhile, President Trump on Friday said nearly every federal agency in the U.S. government could fall under the scrutiny of Doge. Trump was questioned by Fox News White House correspondent Peter Doocy.
And we're going to be doing more and more of that. We're going to be looking at Department of Education. We're going to be looking at even our military. We're going to be looking at tremendous amounts of money, Peter, being spent on things that bear no relationship to anything and have no value. We're talking about trillions of dollars. It will be, in the end, trillions of dollars being absolutely wasted and perhaps illegally.
Democratic Senator Chris Murphy appeared on ABC this week Sunday and warned against what he called the billionaire takeover of government.
And I think this is the most serious constitutional crisis the country has faced, certainly since Watergate. The president is attempting to seize control of power and for corrupt purposes. The president wants to be able to decide how and where money is spent so that he can reward his political friends, he can punish his political enemies. That is the evisceration of democracy.
This all comes as more details have emerged of Doge's young so-called engineers who are playing a key role in Musk's overhaul of federal agencies, including Edward Korestein. He's 19 years old, a college dropout. He graduated from Rye Country Day High School last June. Other Doge engineers have been identified as 21-year-old Akash Baba, who has been listed as an expert at the Office of Personnel Management and reportedly has been able to access internal databases. 23-year-old Luke Farrator, a former intern at Musk's SpaceX. 24-year-old Gautier Cole-Killian, 25-year-old Gavin Klieger, who described Trump's failed U.S. Attorney General nominee and accused sexual abuser Matt Gaetz as a victim of the deep state, and 22-year-old Ethan Chautron. Musk said on Friday he would be rehiring 25-year-old Doge staff member Marco Elez, who resigned last week after he was linked to a deleted social media account that advocated racism and eugenics, writing, among other things, normalize Indian hate. Both Trump and J.D. Vance called for Elez to be rehired. For more, we're joined here in New York by Victoria Elliott, reporter for Wired, covering platforms and power. She and her team have broken several major stories on Elon Musk and Doge. Elliott's recent piece is headlined "The Recruitment Effort That Helped Build Elon Musk's Doge Army." Welcome back to Democracy Now!, or to Democracy Now! For the first time. Thank you for joining us. We know you are under the weather, tired for so much reporting on this fire hose of presidential actions. Victoria, what do you think is most important for us to understand of this Doge army? You can refer to them by their names or by their various handles, which are quite amazing.
I mean, I think the most important thing is to note that, you know, what we're really seeing is people coming out of either Musk's companies or companies owned by Peter Thiel, another billionaire who's very close to Musk. He's the chair of Palantir, a big data analytics company that is also a massive defense contractor. And so what I think was really interesting for us when we reported that most recent story is the fact that, you know, these young people were sourcing within these already established networks of people who are very, very technically gifted, probably because they've worked at these companies, but that this is sort of a closed network. And what we've sort of learned being tech reporters in general is that oftentimes people in the tech industry see the press as pretty adversarial. They see government in some ways as sometimes pretty adversarial with overreach and red tape. And so I think what stuck out to me is that although Musk sort of put out this public call on X, it seems that a lot of the people who are part of this effort were people drawn from what he and people who are close to him would consider trusted networks. And in that way, you know, I think this sort of sense that Doge is almost this parallel operation to sort of traditional government operations really feels very salient, particularly when these people have access to really sensitive data that people who are government contractors maybe would not often have, or people who are new hires into government would not often have.
So talk more about who the young people are, like the Rye Country Day graduate from last year. His name, Edward Karstein, he refers to himself as Big Balls. These are the people that the administration is referring to as these efficiency experts. He's the one. Senators aren't allowed now into the Treasury Department to see what's going on. They're stopped by police. But he's right there.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think a lot of these people, you know, if you look at their backgrounds, they're people with really strong technical skills. You know, I think they all have, you know, really some impressive achievements on their resumes. I think Edward Karstein, as you mentioned, is quite young, and our team was able to sort of identify that he was seemed to be associated with a possible DDoS, or distributed denial of service for hire situation. So, you know, that particularly is sketchy. And I think when we're looking at that, even if these people are particularly technically gifted, they may not.
Can you explain what that means for people who are not digitally completely literate?
Sure. So a DDoS thing is a sort of distributed denial of service. It's a form of attack. So it's when someone comes to, your website is flooded with views at such a high rate that it basically shuts your whole website down. It's sort of meant to overwhelm a technical system, and it's a form of cyber attack. And so I think it's one of those things where when we look at that type of instance, you know, even if these young men are very technically gifted, and they very well may be, you know, they do seem to have some of them seem to have questionable backgrounds. And if they were going through the regular process of, you know, doing a security clearance or getting background checked for a government job to access the kind of sensitive data that they would seem to be having access to right now, they may not have actually been given that if they were adhering to the standard protocol that we have set up within the U.S. government for reasons to be able to vet people's background, to be able to ensure that people who are touching this data or can manipulate this data are trustworthy, are, you know, have been sort of vetted. And again, as I've said sort of multiple times, you know, even if these are incredibly technically gifted people who have nothing but the purest of intentions, they've only had access to these systems at best since January 20th. And anyone who started a new job anywhere at any time could tell you that is not enough time to be getting into a system and making substantial changes to it.
And I mean, someone like Marco Ellis, who was the focus this weekend because he was fired when it came out, that now deleted social media account that advocated repealing the Civil Rights Act back to eugenic immigration policy, and, quote, said, just for the record, I was racist before it was cool. And he's the one who advocated normalizing Indian hate. The front person advocating for him to be rehired, which he was Vice President J.D. Vance, whose wife, of course, Usha Vance, is Indian-American. His children, his 3 children, Indian-American. Victoria.
Yeah, I think that's a distraction. The reality is, you know, I think I don't think I think obviously his views would probably, again, if he had been properly background checked, would have come up would have been something that, might have been flagged in the regular process. And, if he was applying for a regular government job, he might not have been hired. But I think the more critical issue is the fact that whether or not it's Marco Ellis or someone else on the Doge team, it does seem that this, parallel entity that is Doge is accessing sensitive data that otherwise would not be available to it. At least from our reporting, we saw that, or it appeared that Marco did at some point have read-write access to the code. And I think this is incredibly important because we've already seen the way that the Doge effort and the Trump administration has tried to get around paying out funds that have been allocated by Congress for, agencies, for programs that have also been approved by Congress. I think that is the most concerning thing.
In a piece that was headlined, a U.S. Treasury threat intelligence analysis designates Doge staff as insider threat. Talk about the significance of that, Victoria.
I think it's important just because it acknowledges that, at least in some capacity, the experts that the Treasury was working with acknowledged that having people in these systems who were not vetted, who had the ability to apparently read and write code and sort of be in these systems without much oversight, without much training, is an incredible risk.
And we're going to talk in a moment about what's been called the PayPal mafia. But I'd like you to go into Elon Musk. You've written about him extensively as an international far-right leader. Talk about his ties to the far-right in Germany, where there was just a mass protest, and how he's used his digital platform.
I mean, he has platformed the leader of the AfD party in Germany in the same way he did with Trump, which is he sort of had an X Spaces with her. He has come out very publicly in support of the AfD. The other weekend, and I apologize, I can't remember the day because they're all blurring together. He posted "Make Europe Great Again." It's very clear that his ambitions for reshaping politics don't end at U.S. borders. And I think, even before the U.S. elections, we saw a taste of that with how he behaved in Brazil. The Brazilian courts required X to take account accounts that they said were associated with their attempted overthrow of a free and fair election. And X refused to do it until the Brazilian government banned the platform. But that resistance that X showed to try and keep up these right-wing accounts and to share the otherwise secret court orders with Congressman Jim Jordan, whose committee then made them public. At the time, many Brazilian scholars and legal experts sort of said that they felt that X's and Musk's behavior was essentially trying to assault their democratic institutions and disobey their duly elected government. And so I think, we've seen tastes of this even before Musk was part of the Trump administration. And I think that, Musk is a global businessman. His interests extend far beyond the U.S. borders. And I think, therefore, his political interests extend beyond the U.S. borders as well.
Let me finally ask you about the difficulty of the challenges of reporting in this time. You have the interim U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia, Edward R. Martin, threatening to go after people who identify or criticize individuals. Wired is breaking story after story. You are naming names, Victoria. Are you concerned?
We're just continuing to do the work.
I want to thank you so much for being with us, Victoria Elliott, reporter for Wired. One other question. Are they downloading this information? Do we know what they're doing inside these agencies, these 19, 20-year-old kids, kids who call themselves big balls, kids who talk about normalizing Indian hate? Are they downloading the private health and financial information of millions of people in this country?
We don't know, and the lack of transparency is what's concerning. My colleagues have also reported that, my colleagues, McKenna Kelly also reported, that it does seem that they want to lean more, that Doge as a sort of mission wants to lean more heavily into AI and automating systems. And, it would follow, although we don't know, that that kind of data would be needed to train an automated system. But again, we don't know. And that is, a big part of the issue is just the lack of transparency.
Victoria Elliott, we thank you so much for being with us. Reporter for Wired, she and her team have broken a number of major stories on Elon Musk and Doge. We'll link to them. Victoria's recent headline, the recruitment effort that helped build Elon Musk's Doge army.